Okay, I guess that works out.
Oh, seems that OP is in my chat. It's funny because he's standing right beside me. Okay.
Oh,
I I am just going to say that we could aim for perfection all day and just spin our wheels, or we could get on with it and just enjoy what we're doing and aim for improvement every time we go. So, uh, due to the circumstances that we're in today, I am streaming on location at the Bountiful Farmers Market in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I'm happy to have with me today James, also known as Yamano.
hey, how's it going? I'm just over here in my room. Nothing too special, nothing too fancy. Guess one little benefit is I don't have to wear a mask, but if you guys just want me to wear a mask just for whatever reason, I got one next to me.
Yeah, I don't want you to spread your germs all the way over here on the other side of the world. So please, no, I'm just kidding. Um,
No, we did have a running joke that I think one of the guys in this old game Lineage 2 I played with, he was making a joke that I was sick for 5 years and getting people sick through the internet.
yeah. Wait, isn't that NFD?
No, that was well before NFD.
Oh, okay.
NFD is from Ninja Ferret.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so today we are about to start our podcast episode. This is episode 2 of the monthly meta. Self-improvement. Why and how? I'm Joe, also known as Joe King Media on Twitch here, and uh,
I'm
I
j-
am a designer and also a chef. And we talked about the intros going shorter. I don't know why I'm rambling, so I'm gonna pass it over to James.
All right, well, I'm James. I am pretty much ready to go whenever you are. So,
Okay.
on today's episode, we're going to be talking about self-improvement, why and how, which I think this is probably going to be one of the most important episodes of this podcast series that we're doing because this podcast is all about improvement.
Yes, hence our improved rating system.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so Joe, why bother? Why bother improving?
Oh my goodness, so many reasons. Honestly, I wrote just a small list of the four that I see, and I'm gonna start with faith. Faith is a great thing. Like, I don't necessarily mean faith in a religious standpoint. I just mean like the utmost belief in yourself. Um, and then I also think that community can. I don't know if I should just spit these out or describe each one. I'm just gonna spit them out. Community can be a great reason to improve. You know, like you're part of a team or a business or a project, and it could really be helpful to improve yourself during that process so that the whole team can benefit, including yourself. Um, Accountability is a great thing to improve for, so that you're more trustworthy as an individual. And then maybe the lesser, maybe more evil reason for self improvement is pride. But on the opposite end of pride, I have virtue written down as well. Pride and virtue could be easily confused. So I'm excited to hear your standpoint on the difference between the two. But yeah, those are my four.
Well, I don't know if I can really consider pride and virtue as like two opposite ends of the spectrum because they're both kind of similar in that having some of either or is good. but having too much of either is pretty bad. So there goes the saying that virtue taken to the extreme becomes a vice,
Mm.
and you can see that all the time. Like you imagine someone that's really going out their way to do as much as they can to improve the world as much as possible. They can take that to an extreme and basically start pushing their own values and beliefs on the people so hard that they start not only getting rejection from other people, but they might even take it further and might actually try to force them to take it. So, same thing with pride. Having a little bit of pride in yourself is good. Um, some cases you could take that as self-esteem. Low self-esteem is good. Too much self-esteem is bad. You know, pride is known as a deadly sin for good reason. Leads to a lot of arrogance, and arrogance will take you out if you hang on to it for too much. But having it in moderation, I think, is pretty good, either or. But you had faith earlier, right?
Yes, I did say faith.
Okay, so can you elaborate into that one? Because I know maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago and on, a lot of people were put a lot of stock into faith, but nowadays it's not so much.
Oh, dude, honestly, so that's huge for me. And on the big thing that drove me away from faith, which I'm now building the courage and I feel like emotional responsibility to come back to faith, is that I thought I don't want faith because I'm not super religious.
Hmm.
Now that I understand, and something that I wish more religions elaborated on, is that faith is not a word of religion. Faith is an action. It's a skill, and you can build it. And a religion could be a tool to build your faith or work on your faith and strengthen it, but it is not a definition of faith. The definition of faith is your absolute belief that whatever it is that you have faith in is a reality, is true, and can drive you to accompanying or accomplishing whatever that belief is. And as a tool to improve yourself, belief is very powerful.
I agree with that. What do you think about, I guess, holding on to belief too strongly, like to the point where you can become zealous?
Guilty.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like when I first watched Pokemon the movie 2000, I literally was like, oh, he said chosen one. I'm the chosen one.
Oh, really?
And I believed it my whole life. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking about it. Um, but that's how I feel about the overzealous behavior that some of us like faithful could could end up, like just mystified, right? And when I say like it's important to have faith, it's also important to not be mystified by that faith, because you can't just have faith for something to come true. You have to have faith and apply that faith through action.
What do you mean by mystified?
Mystified, like okay, let's give you a practical example here for me. So I could repeat to myself every morning when I wake up, I'm gonna have $1 million on December 31st, 2020. Every single morning of every day, I could affirm that to myself and have absolute faith in it. But every day I spend my money willy nilly. I don't check my budget. I don't work hard to earn more money. Uh, so I'm mystified in the fact that my faith is going to make me $1 million. Whereas the real reality is you have to put effort and use the faith to drive the effort. Then your faith isn't mystified. It's backed up with concrete sweat, blood, and tears, and hard work every day to build that $1 million by December 31st, 2020.
Right. And I think that right there is probably one of the most important things to kind of realize if you're trying to get any kind of improvement, maybe not even just of improving yourself, but if you have any kind of desired goal. I mean, first and foremost, like you should have a goal. And I think that is something a lot of people don't really have. They kind of have a general idea, like their goal is something kind of loose, like, oh, what do you want to do in the future? It's like, oh, I want to be happy, I want to be able to retire and go on vacation every single day. And, it's kind of out there, but nothing really concrete. There isn't like some specific, I want to be here in this amount of time. And then there's also, as you said, there's having a reasonable goal, something that you could actually attain, something that you can plan out and get towards. It requires you kind of having reasonable expectations of yourself. So, you theoretically would know yourself better than anybody else. You know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you need to work on, what you're best at, what you can handle easily, what is difficult for you to do. And all of these have to be taken into consideration when you're trying to make a goal that you actually want, that you actually will strive for in order to reach that goal. But I definitely think, like, first and foremost, you do need to have a concrete goal, something that's easily defined and not wishy washy, like, I want to be happy.
Yeah, yes, it's true. I think that's part of why faith could be so valuable is that if it's something a little less meaningful, then what you have nothing to have faith in and nothing to allow that faith to drive you to it, especially when it comes to happiness. I mean, there's so many different things that can actually lead to happiness, and everyone's different. So if it's something simple like I want happiness, go hobby hunting. Um, I'm not sure if that's kind of the statement you're trying to make. Um, but I don't know why. Like I feel like I keep ending up leading back to faith because I just feel like so let down from the past because of that fact. Like I said, is that a lot of religions don't really explain that faith is more like a tool. Religion can just fortify faith, but you don't need a religion to have faith.
There's, I've done some studying on religion recently, in like the past few months. I think that'll probably be better left for another specific podcast, especially since usually when you're talking about religion, it is a bit of a contentious topic, especially since entire wars have been fought over religion. But in short, I think one of the important things that you can get from religious faith is that, from what I've seen as a general trend, is that usually in the faith there is a higher power that everyone within the religion kind of all agrees upon what that higher power is, what kind of characteristics that higher power has, and in a sense, what that higher power expects of everyone within that religious group. So in there, you kind of have this system that you have something that's higher than you in a supernatural sense. So one thing that does is that you yourself are no longer the most important thing. Then, secondly, every other human is also no longer the most important thing. There's something above you to where you are no longer in a kind of circumstance where you need to put yourself or someone else on a pedestal, which in a sense is good. If you put yourself too high on a pedestal, then you run into the risk of becoming a narcissist. And then you put other people too high on a pedestal, then you run the risk of basically becoming a doormat. And then one of the phrases is, you know, don't meet your heroes. Kind of a weird little statement, but I think
It is because I've heard it so many times and I've never understood it.
so. From what I've gotten out of it is that heroes to people generally are kind of in the same context of religion. There are people that are essentially higher than what you are, something that you can look up to, that you can admire, that you can kind of get inspiration to get onto that higher level that where they're at. The problem is that all the heroes that people do have, like real life heroes, they're all humans, and all humans make mistakes. They're not perfect. They're not infallible. So the issue is that when you do meet these people in person, and then you do see like, oh, maybe they're a little bit of a jerk, and they're not good with money, and maybe they have a drug problem, and maybe they're not so great towards their spouse or partner or whatnot, and you start seeing all these little cracks and this holistic image that you've given to someone, and everything that you were writing on that, like all these, I want to be like this person, I want to be great, it's all this inspiration to become better, kind of just sinks away as you pull back the curtains, pull away the mirage, and you see the person as they are, and you just become incredibly disappointed. And so all of your motivation at that point is completely destroyed because you put so much stock in another person that's just like you are, just humans. They have their great aspects, of course, but they also have their flaws. And in a sense, you don't really have that in a religion, kind of, sort of. You can look in the Bible and just go like in Christianity or Judaism, Ju- uh, Judaism, for example, you can look into the Bible and just like, oh, why did God like do all these terrible things? But it's not really so much the point, is that God isn't a human. So there is no issue of you meeting God and God is not living up to your expected ideals. So that whole thing comes shattering down.
I know this is like separating something that is like religion based and something that is fantasy based.
Mm,
But if you've ever seen the movie The Last Unicorn, um, I feel like I could take something from what you're saying and connect it to that movie because at the end of the movie, sorry about the spoilers, everyone. It's a really old movie, so if you haven't seen it, I'm spoiling it. But at the end of the movie, the unicorn basically says, I'm the only one of my kind that has experienced regret. And because I became mortal and experienced regret, I am now a flawed, perfect being, or something along those lines. Like, I'm still immortal, I'm still a perfect being, but I've now experienced regret. And that's the thing that I think you're saying about like, don't meet your heroes. Like, your hero that is human. So like they've messed up a few times.
Y-
Um,
Yeah.
Whereas with religion, it's like God can make these decisions, good or evil, and it be for the perfect reason because he's perfect and immortal.
Right, essentially. So in this case,
Okay.
you're not dealing with an actual human, you're dealing with essentially an ideal. And it is an onus onto you to live up to that ideal as best as you can. So in a sense, faith is good in that way, is that you do have this constant ideal over you. And in a sense, like an ideal is also a judge because when you don't fulfill your obligation to live up to the ideal, then you feel judgment upon yourself. And it's kind of like, in the sense of you're not living up to your potential, which is another kind of a weird phrase because, no one can exactly tell you what your potential is, but they have a sense that you could be better than what you are, or you you could be better than what you are in the future, or you could be better than what you are right now, but you're not, or you're not working towards being better than what you are right now. And they may not know, they not be may be able to articulate exactly what that better self of you is, or what that better version of you is, but they have a sense that you're not living up to that. And everyone can feel that, and everyone knows it without explicitly knowing it. So I think that's one important facet of faith is having that kind of ideal. So you have like this underlying drive to become better according to it. And then there's also, you know, you have in the kind of religious community, you have all of these like-minded people that they're all kind of holding each other accountable for bringing out the best versions of themselves in an ideal community. That doesn't always happen, but that's kind of the overall plan, the point, the ideal out of a religious community is for that. So I can easily see in that extent why to you and maybe to a lot of other people why faith is so important. Like that's a pretty big driving factor in those religious communities. And in a sense, I think losing that isn't exactly a good thing. Some people will argue against that or saying, oh, there's all these wars and terrible things that have been caused by religion, but really,
Well, I mean, that's the reason why originally I didn't look at faith as something very important in my life, is that I had faith and religion too closely connected. And that's why I really want to drive home the point that you can have faith and be agnostic, or what's it called, as uh what's the other word for agnostic? I'm drawing a blank right now.
atheists.
Atheist. There you go. You could be agnostic or atheist because I know they mean different things. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly the difference, but you could be either of those and still have faith. In fact, if you are atheist, which I think means you don't believe in anything, you actually do believe something. And the thing you believe is that you don't believe. So all I'm trying to say is faith is separate from religion. And I really want to drive that point home because it's a powerful tool for both the religious and the non-religious. And if more people use that as a skill, they could find themselves highly motivated.
Yeah, and I think that's important because end all be all, it's kind of the point. Like everyone should be striving towards something at all times. It's kind of the underlying point of humanity is to be doing something, to be striving towards something, to have a goal and be moving towards it. And maybe not even necessarily to fully complete the goal, but just to be in the process of constantly moving towards the goal. And by doing that, you do get a sense of meaning out of that. And if you don't do that, then you don't have that sense of meaning. And at that point, you're more than likely to just get into a whole bunch of trouble. Like, because you have this innate instinct as a human to be essentially have a purpose. It's the big question. What's my purpose in life? What are everyone's purpose in life? Why are we here? And essentially, what I think is that it's up to you to find out what that is and then be doing it.
Um, that's huge for me. What you just said really drove home my high school years, actually. So the thing is that in my high school years, I wanted to improve in my social skills. However, for the wrong reasons, I improved in my social skills. So it led me on a wild goose chase of chasing acceptance, when in reality, I should have been chasing me accepting myself instead of like others accepting me. So that's actually like a really defining factor on why are you trying to improve whatever it is you're improving. Is it for you? Is it for your community? Is it for your business? And why and how are you ap- approaching that improvement as well?
Me personally, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think you can basically sum them down to two main things. The first we've been discussing already is there's something that you want to achieve, something that you want to acquire. I think the one that we haven't really got into that you kind of touched the surface on with your last statement, um, with your goal in high school, is avoiding something bad. So this is just conjecture. I'm just making a assumption at this point, but ideally, in my sense, like if I were, in that younger years, and I even had other conversations with other people that have kind of gone through a similar thing where, in their formative years, they're trying to make friends and they're trying to figure out how to make friends, maybe even become popular and have a lot of people that admire them or and so forth. And maybe not even for the goal of just getting friends in itself, but avoiding loneliness. And so I think avoiding like an undesirable outcome is a very big motivator for people. You'll even hear in stories, if you read books or listen to interviews of like many different famous people, a lot of their driving motivations is they've been in a very bad situation. Maybe they grew up in very bad neighborhood. Maybe they live with abusive parents. Maybe they, grew up in a gang or whatnot, and their main means for achieving the success that they had in their life wasn't really so much for getting that success, but to get out of whatever situation they were in that was causing them a lot of misery. And so, like, whatever that they got in the end, didn't matter as much as I need to get out of this little circle of hell that I'm in. Just to sum it up, it's just there are people that do find success or do achieve success not for the sake of getting that success in itself, but to get away from whatever bad situation that they were previously in.
You know what? That reminds me of the point that Napoleon Hill makes in his book, Think and Grow Rich. It's really quite, it simplifies it what you're saying, but basically the point he drives home there is that sometimes when you're at your lowest of low point, that's the seed of success that's either gonna bloom if you choose to get up and get back on the horse, or get trampled on if you choose to stay on the ground.
Yeah.
And if you get up and get back on the horse, you're right. It's like, I just don't want that to happen again. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to improve and I'm not going to make that same mistake again. And that typically will lead to the success of the improvement you're trying to make. Whereas if you just stay on the ground, you've admitted defeat and you're, well, you're gonna keep doing what you're doing. And maybe that's just what you're supposed to do with your life.
And yeah, that kind of takes me back to the whole going back to religion again. Use Christianity for example, because I know that one the best out of all of the other ones. I think that's kind of like the point of Jesus is like, Jesus is supposed to be like this higher ideal. And he kind of brings them a little bit closer to humanity than just strictly God. Because Jesus was born from a human woman and from God himself. And so you kind of have this divide between, humanity and the divine. And so when you look at him as an ideal to that's worth striving towards being like, it kind of makes it a little bit, in a sense, a little bit more attainable because of the humanity in Jesus himself.
You
And
stole the word right out of my mouth. Go on.
yeah, and so this was this thing I was thinking about beforehand. It just kind of came to me while I was working, and I was having a conversation with someone else because we were talking about movies, and the movies they were specifically talking about were these, these cheesy little rom-coms, and it's just like, oh, what's kind of the appeal of these cheesy rom-coms? And they gave me like, oh, they're basically all the same. They have all this same formula of A, B, C, and D, but a little bit changes in between each one, but they're all basically the same. But they're all just fun to watch. And I was just like, oh, you know what? That kind of reminds me of the hero's journey. And honestly, I think the hero's journey is it's an important model for improvement because I mean that's essentially what it is. You essentially have someone that gets a call to an adventure, so it's kind of their initial spark to go out into the world and start the path on becoming better than what they are, and they have to go through all of these trials and tribulations that will bring them to their lowest point. And so I was kind of relating that to Jesus because, okay, so you have Jesus, he was born, he has his mission to go different places and spread the word. So, in that sense, he kind of has that call to adventure that leads him to going through a whole bunch of trials and tribulations. Um, you know, you have the trials with the Pharisees, you have the trials with Satan and all of the temptations that he brought forth, the whole 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, and then it leads him all the way down to him finally becoming crucified, which I think is the lowest point. And then the interesting thing that clicked with me there was that in that time, he ends up dying, and then he's reborn 3 days later, and is even better than what he used to be.
He becomes omnipotent. I do want to say something, and it's just because I just read this passage.
Mhm.
Uh, in John, because I am on my mission of, as an adult, an understanding adult, my first time through the Bible. And I was told that if you really want to get it right, start with the four books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Mhm.
So I'm on John, and of the four, John seems to have a greater understanding of Jesus because uh, I guess he grew up with him and he's part of the same family bloodline compared to the other four that wrote the books. Um, but, anyways, earlier in the story, way before the Last Supper, he says that Jesus actually mentions to the 12, one of you is the devil. He literally says that one of you is the devil, and I know who you are. And I have you here for the reason that you're here. And he addresses them and says it, which is very interesting to me that you would mention, like Judas, and how it led to Jesus's resurrection, who in turn developed him as becoming omnipotent and able to show his disciples, now it's your turn to go out and do what I did with you.
Right. And, that leaves the whole thing, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. And I think that's exactly it. Like, so went through this whole journey of transformation and rebirth, and that's essentially same same cycle that you constantly go through when you're trying to improve yourself. It's like working out. It's like taking medicine. When you get sick, you're brought to a lowly point. You take medicine. It hurts for a while. You're just feeling absolutely horrible, and then you come back even better. You're working out. You're breaking down the muscles. You get down to a point of weakness, and then you rebuild back up, and you become stronger than what you used to be in the beginning. You go through some terrible tragedy. You break down. You go through a dark pit of suffering and all the thoughts of, where did I go wrong and all of that. And then you come back with even more mental fortitude than what you had before that whole incident. The same thing over and over and over again. It's this transformation and rebirth over and over again. Every time you become better.
Yeah. And I think that that gives us the perfect thing to tie into the first, I guess, question of the episode on why do people improve. Um and I think that the the main point here is, as we're talking about it, attainability. I think it can be, like, if you connect all the dots to what we've been saying, it's that improvement is attainable. And if you don't think about it that way, then there is no improvement, because without obtainability, there's giving up.
Yeah. And as we discussed before, I think either or of those motivations, even better if you have both, of trying to attain a goal and trying to get away from an undesired outcome. Like either or, but definitely both together are very powerful motivators. So at least get you started on that journey. Now, the whole concept of, the transformation and rebirth, it sounds nice. It still has the problem of at some point you essentially die before you're reborn. And this is kind of an interesting thing I was reading in a book about a couple of months ago. It was by, I believe it was by Alan Watts. It was called Zen and the Art of Archery. And essentially it was about this professor that went over to Japan, and I think he was a philosophy professor, and one thing that he wanted to do was learn about Zen. Like he's been learning about it indirectly through reading and so forth, but he wanted to actually get the information directly from a Zen master. And so he was directed to him and his wife went over there. His wife was directed towards flower arrangement, and he was directed towards archery. And the the master archer didn't directly teach him what Zen was, but rather taught him what it was indirectly by making him go through the entire process so he could figure it out by himself through the entire training process that he was put through. And in that, it was kind of the same ordeal. He's been subjected to practicing archery and doing this thing that he found impossible, which was essentially taking this giant bow and knocking back an arrow all the way to the point where the strain is so strenuous that it's actually causing his entire body to shake rapidly. And the idea was to shoot the arrow without any effort. And from reading the book and also from his own point of view, like he just went into that just saying that's impossible. And bring back to your prior point of understanding that whatever goal that you're striving for is attainable. Kind of started out with the opposite notion that this goal that he was trying to that was put forth in front of him of shooting this arrow on this giant bow with no effort was absolutely impossible. And throughout that entire book, it got to the point where he was trying to figure it out mentally, all these little tricks and strategies and whatnot that just didn't work until he finally just got to the point where, in a sense, he kind of just gave up and but still kept doing it and kind of went through a bit of a spiritual death. And in that moment is when he was finally able to do it. And so this whole concept of transformation and rebirth is just, it's not even just like something that's just found in, Christianity or Judaism, or it's found like all over the world. This is just like a universal human concept. And I think it's very important to understand, if you're going to create a goal for yourself and strive to attain it, that this is something that you do need to be aware of, that it's not going to be easy, and that you are going to go through this death and rebirth, which is going to be very painful, but it's worth it. It gives you meaning. It's not something that can be explicitly described to you, but it's something that you feel is instinctual and everyone feels it, and it's an act of faith to go and do it. But if you go and do it, there's nothing better than that. There's like the whole saying that a lot of people go through a lot of education so they get paid to play rather than paid to work.
I think I think what you're saying kind of leads us into question two, doesn't it?
Yeah, so question two is how do people improve?
Right? And I think also, I think you said it a couple statements ago, but something that you said kind of reminds me of have you heard of the Knights Templar? I
Well,
know it sounds like a silly question because a lot of people have, but I thought I'd start the conversation
like
like this.
in general, or is that like
Yeah,
a
in general, the
yeah,
Knights Templar from planet Earth in the Dark Ages.
yeah.
Okay. So they actually uh got genocided by the Pope's orders, and they ended up going into hiding and then reincarnating or re-establishing themselves as the Order of Christ. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's a little known fact, but it's also somewhere on the internet mentioned that people believe that the Order of Christ is what became the Freemason enterprise or whatever.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
I'm not going too far down that. That could be like a podcast episode on its own, and I would need to do more research. But
Mm,
something in a documentary I watched about that defining moment of change is that when the Templars ended up shifting to the Order of Christ, they gave their recruits an exercise. And this exercise was to go through a cave tunnel that shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk to the point where only a really compressed body could be forced through to a point of even almost collapsing, dying, or unconsciousness would
mm,
happen before they get through that last bit of the tunnel. And it's scientific, but it's definitely believed by them that getting through that point and surviving brings you to a point of reincarnation and possibly even a superior version of yourself. And I think that um like the Christ story, even movies, any movie that has the hero formula that you mentioned, um, any sorts of things like that has a similar plot where you keep forcing yourself through whatever it is you're trying to improve on, like even the longest yard when he has to work with other prisoners to build a football team, like that's similar to when you get to the climax and they all literally hate each other and they get through that point, and then on the other end of that conflict they're a stronger team together for it.
right. So, yeah, like you can see this kind of stuff just everywhere. It's basically a tale as old as time. And
Okay, don't go quoting Disney on me. Oh, I'm just kidding.
well, I mean, Disney makes a lot of money off the hero's journey. Like Disney uses it a lot, especially with these Marvel movies. Like it's just especially all of the initial Marvel movies where they introduce a new hero. It's just oh well, another hero's journey, another one and another one and another one. It's the same thing over and over and over again. But people do not get sick of it. Like people
And we
love seeing
won't.
it. Like not even just in movies and in books and video games, but in just actual real life people. You know, people.
But is it sad that, and I genuinely am asking it as a question, is it sad? Is it sad that a majority of people who watch it and enjoy it seem to watch it and enjoy it because of the belief that they can't obtain it? So is it a form of fantasizing, or as I was stating about earlier, when it came to faith, is like, is it a mystified belief? Is it not a reality?
I mean, I personally don't think so. I don't think that people watch it and they look at it and just like, oh, this is nice, this could happen, but this is unobtainable. I don't think that's the case. I think people like it because maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, like that's something that they want for themselves. It's one of those human instincts. It's not something that everyone knows, but they don't really know that they do know. Even some that do somewhat consciously know, they may not be able to explicitly state what they know. And that's it's a pretty common thing among people. Like the whole unspoken rules thing. Like there's a lot of unspoken rules, or even some that are specific to men and specific to women. Like I guess for one example for men is, there's bathroom etiquette, there's walking on the street and doing the head nod. There's even like different directions. There's like the upward head nod for someone that you know, and the downwards for someone that you don't know. It's kind of like a little bit of a bow of respect. For women, there's the whole, sharing like the hygiene products in case someone's like, going through their time and they forgot a tampon or Tampax or whatnot, and it's just like, oh, this is just what you do. There's the bathroom etiquette and all of that. These aren't things that people sat down and just went like, okay, these are the rules of etiquette for every single situation that you come across in your life. It's just something that's just it gets picked up and shared without any verbal communication about it whatsoever. And I think it's the same thing with this hero journey thing. I mean, the hero's journey, it's been well documented now, but even so, a lot of people don't know what this concept is or even that it had a name, but they can recognize it, but not exactly tell you what it is.
I'm trying to think of some of the earliest references I know of it, and I think it'd be the Greek play. Um, oh no. Okay, so I remember it from English class. There's a Greek play that's older than this one I'm about to say. I forget the name of the Greek play, but any Shakespeare. there's Henry the Fourth.
Hmm.
There's Shakespeare, or there's sorry, Hamlet. There's Macbeth. Macbeth is the craziest version of this hero story because it's the opposite end of it. It's like literally a hero story gone wrong if you look at it that way. But just stating that, like, there's ancient Greek stories that talk about the hero story. There's the Bible.
Hmm.
There's before the Bible. There's the Tao Te Ching.
Hmm.
There's the golden, I forget what it's called, the golden book, or of the golden era. I don't know my references. Don't quote me on the names, but I'm just trying to say that there's evidence of us understanding this formula and this virtue, if you will, uh, through storytelling.
Yeah. And storytelling, I think storytelling is like absolutely important because storytelling does allow people to exchange information of very deeply embedded truths without even knowing that that's what they're doing in the first place. Like it's
Mhm.
absolutely phenomenal.
Well, and there's also the factor that I can learn something without having to experience it.
Right. That's I mean that's a superpower for humans anyway. We kind of have the power to think and conceptualize the future so you can imagine different scenarios that you can take and play out how they'll go just based on like your own prior experience and other people's prior experience, and then after running all these simulations through your head you can pick the best course of action that you can think of and go with that. So in a sense, it's kind of like there's all these different versions of yourself that failed miserably in your thoughts, but not in reality. And so it's very helpful.
Don't we all do that?
I think
We all
maybe,
just go, what do I say when someone says this? What do I say when this happens and someone questions me about this? And you repeat it over and over in your head for every single response until you think you know. And then a response that you weren't expecting happens and then you have to wing it.
yeah. I mean, that's gonna happen. There's always gonna be that little bit of randomness, but it's good because like if everything went exactly as how you expected, then you'll get bored very quickly. And there's also the other end of that where you go through
Yeah.
an interaction, and then after that interaction, you go and think back like, oh, I should have said this one, said this, I should have done this one, that happened, and you're going through all this stuff, but instead of in the future, it's all in the past. But it's for like if you get into a situation like that in the future, now you've ran through all of these simulations in your head, now you're like more ready for next time.
Yeah.
Anila says some people are just so passive and don't have the ability of foresight and prediction, totally responsive and gullible. Oh, that brings up something interesting. I don't know if we have time for it though. I think it could be its own podcast. Probably put that as an episode. But I guess to briefly touch on it, this is the ecology concept. So have you ever heard of R versus K selection?
Uh, so I think it's a high school thing, but I probably forgot it.
I don't think I learned
It
this in high school. I learned it
and
in.
then I haven't because I don't have my post secondary education is
Mhm.
all art related, so there's no psychology in this mind. And also, hello Nilo, thank you for tuning into our podcast.
No, no, that's fine. Yeah, this isn't so much art or psychology, but this one's more like a branch of biology, which is ecology, basically the study of the ecosystem.
Oh,
But
interesting. Okay.
ecology, I guess, biology and psychology has kind of mixed within like the past couple of few decades with evolutionary psychology. But this one specifically, so you have, I'm gonna try to explain this as quickly as possible. That's still understood. There's R versus K selection. These are
Mhm.
basically two major pathways that a species can take in order to have their genes survive generation after generation. So, an R selected species would prioritize a short life strategy. So their strategy is having as many offspring as possible and living under the assumption that you can die at any moment. So everything that needs to be done quickly without really much regard of future events because you're not really going to make it to the future. You're going to have a very short life. So, these are like our selected species are usually small prey animals, like for example, rabbits. Have rabbits, they have a lot of children. They don't really like store food or whatnot. They just get whatever they can and just eat it and gobble up and just go on to the next and next and next. Like everything is just done without any kind of thought of sacrificing something for later use. Versus
So
case,
like entrepreneurs. That was a joke. You can continue.
I don't know. But yeah, so you have case selected, which they're the complete opposite. So case selected species, they'll have a lot less children. They actually put resources into their children. They store food. They have all of their plans for tackling the problem of life is a long-term strategy versus the short-term strategy of our selected species. Now, humans are a K-selected species, but there is a division between R and K among the human species. And you can see that by the R selected humans don't really have a long-term plan. The
Entrepreneurs. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
but these are like the YOLO type of people, like, which it still doesn't make sense to me because, like, YOLO means you only live once, and my thought process on hearing that was like, well, you only live once, so you better take as good care of that one life that you have as well as you can. But
Oh, see, so
no.
that literally just recently happened to me where I was like prepping my grocery list, making sure I had enough for a certain amount of time. And my cousin was like, "Why are you getting so prepared? Like, why are you so organized and stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, you only live once."
Yeah.
And then he was just baffled. He was so like confused and like, "What? I thought you only live once is what you say before jumping off a bridge."
Yeah, which makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
Doesn't.
But yeah, so those type of people, the ones that live a very fast, sporadic life where like the best years of their life was like high school, and then it's just all downhill from there. They haven't really made a plan, a long-term plan for their life. They have like a bunch of kids and don't really put not nearly as much effort into their kids as, someone who's more K selected versus you only die once. But this is this is on the opposite end of the spectrum with the case selected people. These are people that, they're more likely to go to university and put in a lot of hours into their studies, and they usually only have like one or two kids, and they put a lot of effort into making sure their kids have the best that they can in order to survive in the world. And they have more stable relationships, and they usually have like higher paying jobs and more stable jobs and whatnot because they're essentially sacrificing a lot of the crazy fun and thrill and experiences that they could have in their youth to make sure that their later years are more stable versus just going with the assumption that there are no later years, so just get everything that you can right now.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, the whole concept of improvement is a case selected strategy, which works well with humans because humans are case selected, though we do have that variance among people. Oh, the meme. Ever been with anyone that drives like they got multiple lives? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say Nilo Yodo. I like how that sounds. Um, but yeah, like I don't know. I kind of want to hold off on even answering Nilo's latest question because that is for the next question we have. So I want to actually cover something that is in your side of the notes, which
Mhm.
is um motivation and time management. And I know that Neil's previous question kind of covers motivation, time management, health management, and even a little bit of self discipline. And we've been talking about that, but I just want to specify specifically about time management because that's been a huge topic in my own life lately where
Mhm.
I just I've been kind of taking notes on my own actions from a day-to-day life and like what did I do for this hour and I'll write it down, and then what did I do for this hour and then I'll write it down, cuz in a week or two, I want to go and look at all those papers and be like, can I categorize all those things I did and kind of stipulate a specific time that is acceptable for each of these tasks that I've been randomly doing? And I feel like time management could be the key to a lot of people's success and improvement.
Oh,
And
definitely.
in taking note or just acknowledging your habits and placing them in a time management strategy could be so powerful. And I also want to state before passing the mic over again is that I don't like that it's called time management. And I'm not quoting myself here. I was just watching a TED talk on this, and the guy said it shouldn't be called time management. I agree. It should be called self management because time just flows second to second, minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. We can't manage that. It's already happening. We can manage ourselves and what we do in the time,
Yeah, I can see where they're going with that. Um,
which typically that's what time management means is like managing the stuff we do within our time. But I feel like it's not an accurate description until we state that self management or even action management.
well, I kind of have a different thought from that. So, for example, in a sense, you can think of like martial arts. That's a form of self-management. However, typically when people do martial arts, the time isn't important to them. What's important to them is, as opposed to just like specific specific focus on what you yourself are doing, which is hard. You don't really have that much control over yourself, and self discipline is the whole process of getting control over yourself. It sounds kind of weird because yourself is you and you think you have complete control over yourself, but you think about it for even more than a couple of minutes, you kind of notice that you don't really have that much self control. Otherwise, the whole idea of procrastination would just be so alien to people. Like they wouldn't even know what that's even like. So when I think of time management, yes, you do. There is a specific amount of time that you have in your life. You don't know how much that exactly is because say you could die in the next hour, you can die in the next 100 years. But regardless of that, the things that you do with your time is more so important than your control over yourself within that time. So this is where, like, for example, having a calendar is important. You can make a calendar and you can, have like, oh, 6 o'clock I'm gonna wake up and then I'm gonna work out or run until 7 o'clock and then I'm gonna take a shower at 7 o'clock to 7:15 and then have breakfast until like 7:30 and these are the things that you're planning to do with your block of time. So that would be time management. If you actually fulfill that, that would be more management of the self. That goes back to self discipline. So you kind of have like this whole plan of what you're going to do with your time, and that's in contrast with can you force yourself to adhere to that plan that you have over the time that you're going to have in the future.
Yeah, significance.
Yeah. So I would say self-discipline and time management, they're two separate things, but they work really well together. Um, so yeah, so we have motivation strategies.
Yeah.
That one's a little bit hard. Motivation is very, very hard. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about beforehand of, why do people we sum that down to either trying to attain a specific goal or trying to avoid an undesirable outcome. And they usually work better if you have both of those running at the same time. But then there's still the question of, maybe if you're trying to get away from an undesirable outcome, that one's more apparent because maybe you put yourself in that situation to begin with, maybe you didn't, but that one's more readily apparent to you that just from instinct that whatever situation you're in, you feel really bad in and no longer want to feel bad in this situation. So, however way you get out of that, it doesn't matter which path you take as long as you go and get out of that situation. But on the opposite end, there's trying to figure out, like, say, if getting out of a bad situation is in the consideration, there's trying to figure out where you're trying to go in the first place.
It seems to me that I am a broken record when I say this. But those two things, the avoiding undesirable outcome and obtaining a desired outcome, could just lead back to that same word, faith. But with that being said, okay, to me, yes, faith can be one of the strongest motivation strategies. However, also very strong and useful is momentum. And I just keep hearing it because I keep listening to business talks and going to seminars and stuff. And I don't know how many different business mentors all say the same thing, which is you need to master momentum. Because if you build up momentum, things become easy. But once you lose the momentum, it can become impossible to rebuild or even regain the momentum you were previously at.
Oh, yeah, it's the Matthew principle. So that one's basically to those that have, more will be given. To those who have not, more will be taken. And it's a fundamental it's a fundamental rule of the universe where the more you start getting something, you're just going to keep getting exponentially more and more and more. So I guess if we use money as an example, if you have no money, it's going to be extremely difficult, if not maybe even impossible, to make a lot of money starting from zero. What's more likely is going to happen is that every attempt that you try to make money is just going to end up with you just being more and more in debt. However, if you do have a lot of money, it's a lot easier to make money because you can, it's like the song, it takes money to make money. You can have that money that you have in your possession and you can invest it and you can flip it and you can turn it into more money for yourself.
Leveraging.
Um, Same thing with art. Like, if you're an artist and you don't really have like an audience, it's really hard to get one. Like
Hmm.
like a lot of artists go through their lives accomplishing nothing. And very, 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 very few artists get all of the accolades. You can see this most prominently with music. Like most of the music that everyone listens to, that gets downloaded millions and millions of time is from like a handful of artists. There's a lot of artists that make music, and all their music gets downloaded maybe by like themselves, maybe by like, a couple of friends or family members, but in the grand scheme of things, it's basically zero.
Hmm.
Uh, Same thing with like, heck, even with like stars. You have a star is you have a big star is going to accumulate mass a lot quicker than a smaller star. Like smaller stars are going to burn out at a small size, and the bigger stars are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, like a increasingly exponential rate before they finally burn out. Like it's just the law of the universe, and it's a very important thing to note when you're doing anything, to keep that into consideration. So, like, anytime you start at zero, it's going to be incredibly hard to even get to one. Nonetheless, trying
So
to get to
now,
100.
and I know I'm going to sound like the church choir, but there is a way to break that lack of momentum and start to rebuild that snowball. And again, not religion, but faith can be that thing because I literally am coming out of that, like, that lack of momentum, lack of motivation, lack of so much. And part of it is like even this podcast, right? It's something that's adding to and building onto my momentum. And even just like making the connection with you and getting to talk about these things. I feel like because of the foundation of faith I grew up with and then rediscovered, I can see myself finding the momentum that I had let fall and possibly even exceeding it. And you have to turn it around. There
Yeah,
has to be a way to turn it around. So you just do. You get up and you move.
yeah. And I think part of that is, yes, you do need to have faith. You need to have, maybe in a more technical sense, an unreasonable belief in yourself that whatever goal that you set forth can attain it. Because if you don't at least have that, you're not going to. And then, secondly, I think one of the biggest factors of motivation is that whatever goal that you set for yourself needs to be worth the difficulty.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, if I set a goal for myself that, like, after this podcast I'm gonna go and grab a cupcake, it's incredibly easy. I do not believe I will fail that. I could fail that. Could fail in very horrible ways, but it's very unlikely for me to fail that goal. But if I say, like, by the time, but in like 10 years time I want to be a millionaire, it's a lot harder goal. Because it's a lot harder, am I going to have the motivation to even really start to try to get to that? From a chemistry standpoint, you know, there's there's a thing called activation energy. It's kind of a threshold that you need to reach in order to start up a reaction.
Yeah, I'll take two, please.
And so a lot of cases that energy activation is very high and is very difficult to reach in a natural way. So in this case, this is where a catalyst comes in handy in order to lower that activation energy. So
And
you
he's not
can
talking about Red Bull, ladies and gentlemen.
no, no. Although I don't know, maybe sometimes you need a little kick. You're on a long-term project, you're falling asleep, you got to get it done by tomorrow, so you get that little
It
kick
could
of
be, yeah.
caffeine in. Um, but I guess to turn that into like, normal English, this catalyst, in order to lower that activation energy, in order to reach whatever thing that you set for yourself, you do catalysts to kind of bring it down a little bit, bring that wall down a little bit so you can actually like jump up and reach over it instead of just staring at this 100-foot wall that, how are you going to scale that? And that's kind of how I conceptualize motivation. That it's this threshold that you need to reach, that you need to get over before you can start going towards where you want to go. And there are many different catalysts. There's people in your life that will motivate you by holding you accountable for reaching your goals. That works for a lot of people. Like from what I've seen with working with a lot of younger people is that, just the fact of having someone that actually cares on whether they succeed or not is enough motivation for them to actually like go up and try. Like even like in a lot of sessions I have with tutoring and teaching, just that alone, just getting whatever through whatever block they have in their mind by just reconceptualizing their reconceptualizing their train of thought, and then just having like, this person behind them that's just like, hey, you can do it, I believe in you, I really invested in your success. That's just enough to just make them take off. And a lot of cases they don't even need the actual tutoring, they just need a reason to actually work hard to figure out the material for themselves. So
And it can even be ungenuine. It depends on how narcissistic you are. And I know it sounds like a joke,
mhm.
but legit, I know people like that, that they come off as incapable, and someone just goes to them in a sarcastic way and says, "Oh, you could totally get first place in this race," and because he's narcissistic and is like, "Oh yeah, this person's all about me," like I'm gonna crush it, and then they win.
Yeah.
It's it could totally be that fake person in your life that just says something to shut you up, but you take it the wrong way in a good way, and you turn it into that motivation.
Hey,
Right.
works.
And on another end, there could even be the negative statements that could be the motivation. Like, I'm going to prove those people wrong for down talking me, for lacking in their faith on me, for saying I'm going to fail, for pointing out my flaws. I'm going to show them what I'm made of.
Oh
That as
yeah.
well.
I definitely have my group of friends that achieve things that they normally just wouldn't really care about achieving, specifically out of spite. Like I have one friend who got his chemical engineering degree, even though he really didn't even like chemical engineering, out of pure spite. Because he was told that, this isn't for you, you can't do this, you should do something easier. And just no.
Yep.
So, that's another form of motivation. Ideally, having a more positive form of motivation would be better, but hey, it's an anime trope for a reason.
Yeah. Yep. Again, like just like the hero story, that that success out of spite is totally one of those things that we keep seeing in culture.
Hmm.
Actually, I can attest to that because couple of years ago, my family all wanted me to join them on their flea market booth venture, and I really didn't want to. And out of spite, I was like, "Sure, I'll show up. I'm gonna show up and bring trading card games," because I was like, trading card games is what they won't think of as success. and it probably won't be successful, but I'm going to do it just because they want me there, and I'm going to do something I want to do to spite them. So I did it. I brought trading card games to the flea market in my parents' booth, and they had like actually serious stuff. They had clothing for sale. They had Himalayan salt lamps and semi-precious stones, uh, vintage collectibles, stuff like that had actual sellable value. And I had a binder of Pokemon cards and Magic cards, and because of that spite, I literally pushed through it and marketed it and built a community of trading card gamers in my city. And like I made a Facebook group, have 300 members in it now. I know 300 doesn't seem like a lot to most Americans because you guys are all used to a million follows or subscribers or whatever. But I looked at it as a great success, a huge success, and we even built like a list of assets and products and an inventory and a financial growth that we haven't seen in any other category, and that was all based on the wrong reason.
And hey, I wouldn't say I wouldn't knock on 300 'cause I mean, having 300 people watching you on Twitch, that's already a lot of people.
Oh yeah, it'd be so cool if my trading card community would come check out Twitch. However, there was some amount of time that passed since I stopped pursuing the trading card community and even engaging with them. So I'm re-ensuing that venture right now, and it's going good. It's going good. And like I just said before this, I'm literally on that mission of trying to rebuild the momentum that I had lost over the past little while here. So um, so it's really cool. Like it's cool seeing all these little goals, missions, and improvements come to fruition and seeing them, and even looking back at like, by the way, through this podcast, looking back at my successes, failures, and goals and motivations and all that. Like I can see in my own history where where I may have went wrong and how I can improve and how I can rebuild that momentum and how I can achieve what it is that I desire. And even now that I've kind of started to realize these things, how to define that improvement. What is the improvement I want to obtain? What is the goal I want to obtain that requires the improvement?
Right. That's what I said earlier. Like whatever goal it is, like it's a lot of work, so that goal really has to be worth it. And I think probably a third aspect to maybe even fourth aspect to having motivation towards achieving that goal is that, you know, really is the goal worth it? And one question is how do you know that whatever goal that you set for yourself is worth it? And I have to say there are moments in everyone's life where they find themselves doing something and they find themselves in a completely different state of mind. So in a Buddhist terminology, it's called munshin. In English, it'll be I guess translated as flow state. And essentially, the flow state. Probably some of the people that are watching this, they probably know what it is. I think probably most people that will be watching this podcast are gamers, and they'll probably recognize or at least maybe remember this flow state where your sense of time is completely different. Everything slows down and you're just hyper focused. And at that point, it's just like whatever you're doing, nothing else matters. And you're just constantly doing whatever you're doing without any care to what's happening elsewhere. And that those kind of moments is where you need to look at and see, okay, when when are the times that I've been in this state and what exactly was I doing? And can I make a reasonable goal out of this that can generate some kind of improvement in my life by doing that?
You're literally describing right now, and I didn't see it until you started describing it because so I'm sitting in the Bountiful Farmers Market, as I mentioned, here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I'm sitting here focused on what we're doing together, this podcast. I have my headphones in and my microphone, and some some ladies came to tell me my boots have been repaired. Um, Katie has walked by and waved, uh, and like I'm like totally in the zone, like barely wave back and just like keep focusing on it. I think that's what you're describing is what is it called? Munshin?
Yeah, and like Buddhist terminology is
Sounds
called
like
munchin.
munching.
It's it's properly used. It's for me. I think the most times I've ever been in that state is when I was been doing martial arts, where you're kind of in that point. It's more recognizable to me in that state because you can kind of really feel time slowing down when you're interacting with someone else, and then you notice that they're moving a lot slower now.
Mm,
It's kind of, I've been in that state before when I'm playing games or working at my job or whatnot. But I think like doing martial arts is where it is the most apparent to me because you can actually like it's not even just feeling time slowing down. It's almost like you can see time slow down, and it's just kind of in that point where you're not really actively thinking about what you're doing. You're just kind of like doing it.
yeah, so that did literally just happen because in my mind when they came to tell me my boots are ready, I was already thinking like, oh no, they're gonna come, they're gonna talk to me. I'm in the middle of this podcast, and they seemed to slow down in the whole action. And I'm so lucky. I asked my cousin to help me, um, uh, since I'm here at the market and have the booth as my responsibility. But yeah, I'm just like, oh, I predeterminedly noticed they're walking towards me, and I'm like, they're gonna interrupt the podcast. And yeah, thankfully my cousin kind of took over and told them that yeah, I'm on the phone because they would understand what a podcast is. Uh, yeah, but that's what I felt like. I literally felt like, oh, I'm so focused on this. I can see all the external forces that could like happen. Um, and I'm like noticing them and trying to anticipate them. So I feel like that's what that is. But I think you're right. Like if you're in a physical activity, it might be more simple to notice or easier to notice.
Right. So, I guess the last thing in this specific category. So there's health management. Now, I put that in there because as far as whatever you're doing, having a healthy body and a healthy mind is very important for whatever you're trying to do, whatever goal you set for yourself. Doesn't matter what it is, you need a healthy body and a healthy mind. Because whatever you're doing that's really worth it is going to be difficult. It's going to be taxing on either your mind or your body or even both. And so, either or if it's both, you need a stronger body and mind. And the reason for that is because your body and mind are interconnected. Like if you have a stronger body, you have a more efficient heart, you have more efficient blood flow through your body, which means you're getting more energy sent towards your brain, which allows you to think for a longer period of time and also more effectively. And the same thing with physical labor, like, a lot of people out there that, you've been to the gym or done like something very physically strenuous, you can get a lot more out of your body through just sheer force of will, which is completely mental. Like you can be where you're in a weak mentality and you kind of just give up what you're doing physically, even though your body can handle more because your mind is just like, God, it's just too hard.
Um, I forget the name of this, but the elephant example. Are you familiar with it?
Mm-mm.
Where like they tie an elephant down when it's a child. So the elephant like tries to get away, but it's tied to like a tiny stick on the ground and it can't get away until the point that it believes that it can't get away. Even after it grows, it doesn't even try to get away anymore because it just doesn't have the will because it's already been taken away.
Oh yeah, that's
Even though the elephant could easily, as a full grown male or female elephant, it could literally kick this little peg in the ground and walk away. It already grew up in that circumstance. It's already tied to a mental prison.
yeah. Like we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth later on as we get into like reasons for why people don't improve. But that in itself is pretty much the basis of an abusive relationship where the other person basically has you convinced that either you can't get away from them or you need them to survive, so you have to take on the abuse.
Hmm.
um so yeah, speaking of that, why do people not improve?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna wing this one. Like on my side of the conversation, all I wrote was exterior influence, uh, single failure, single loss. Like sometimes that's all it takes for you to quit something.
Yeah, I
Actually,
mean,
I have a good example of this. And I'm not gonna say names. Um, but someone sitting right beside me is gonna recognize this exact instance that happened. But anyways, we were in our group of friends and family, and we are playing Magic the Gathering, and one of one of my cousins brought his absolute strongest deck, and my other cousin doesn't believe in or care about meta. He just wants to play and have fun. And this absolute strongest deck, Tron, for those who know, uh, just annihilated the whole game in a matter of minutes. And now, other cousin won't even touch a magic deck ever again in his life. So that's example of that one.
yeah, I kind of have a recent real life example of that as well. um there was one person I was working with for a few years, trying to, I guess, get them to improve themselves because they were very stricken by anxiety, whatnot. And there's one important practice I put into play based off of a old study. So I forgot who it was. I think it was Pangsep, psychologist I was working with rats, that he found out that they had a play circuit. But well, there's a play circuit in rats, which suggests there's play circuits in other animals, not just humans, which makes sense. But ideally, what he found out is that when you have a bigger rat and a little rat, or when you have rats in general, they like to wrestle. But if you have a bigger rat, the bigger rat is usually going to win because it's stronger, which is obvious. But the thing that was noted is that if the little rat doesn't win at least 30% of the time, it's not going to play with the bigger rat ever again. And to take that even further, and I think this is an important thing as far as like any kind of incremental improvement in whatever you're doing, like say, playing a game, for example, is that if the challenge that you're doing is so overwhelmingly difficult that you just do not stand a chance whatsoever, that's just going to put people off like right then and there.
Um, Jordan Peterson mentioned that rat example too. I don't know why I'm mentioning that because that's all I wanted to say about the Peterson thing. But also it's that like I think the big rat was also noted to let the small rat win because it knew that the small rat won't play again.
Yeah.
And, and the thing is that um the the reason Jordan Peterson mentioned that is don't play the game to win, play the game so others will want to play with you again. I think that's the chapter that's from. But I've actually taken that to heart deeply, especially as a Pokemon professor, because as a Pokemon professor, a big part of my objective, a big part of Pokemon's key values too, is that I need to teach the entry level players or even collectors in a way that they don't just give up right away. So I literally built my deck so that it could beat some of the best players in the city, but I also built it in a way that I can take an enjoyable amount of time to win and even like decide to lose, uh, which could be a negative thing sometimes, but also not a negative thing because your goal is to introduce someone to the game. You don't want to win in one turn and just like shut them out. They're not gonna play again. They're not gonna even consider it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think I remember him talking about something like that in an interview. I think if I remember correctly, he was saying that, there's a difference between playing to win one game and playing to win over a great number of games. I think that reminded me a lot of the book. I think I told you about this book before. It's called Games People Play. I think it's by Eric Byrne, where it basically breaks down the actions of people that they have in interactions with other people and even with other animals as a different series of games. And the interesting part about these games is like, again, like going back to the previous example of kind of like knowing something without really knowing, it's just all these games are just kind of mainly figured out on the go rather than explicitly stated what the rules of the game are. Um, you know, Romantic relationships are like a prominent example of that. Um, Sometimes it could be to a detrimental extent because, for example, you're playing like if you're in a dating phase, you can play you're playing the dating game where each person is trying to like gradually get to the point where an actual relationship is established or the entire thing just like falls apart and they just move on to play the game with someone else. And there's the whole notion of knowing when, how, and where to do certain things along the dating game. And none of it is explicitly stated, and pretty much none of it will be explicitly stated, otherwise, the entire game falls apart. But rather, is something that has to be figured out and felt out along the way in order for the game to actually work. And I think. the whole idea of, you know, instead of just trying to win one game and then being booted from games in general, it is better to just be the type of person that people will invite to games where you are competent in the games, but you're not just trying to basically demolish everyone out of the competition. And as a result, pushing yourself out of all the games in general. Because at that point, if you're not playing a game at all, you're basically done. It's like, what do you do then? And the example I was going off of was like there was one time where, you know, I had the Switch and this person I was playing with, they wanted me to get this Mario Kart. I think it was Mario Kart 8, and they weren't really that great at it. So I had to essentially lower my skill level down to the point where it was just slightly above theirs. So when they're racing against me, they can feel the challenge, so they're fully engaged into the game, but they can also feel like they can win. And there'll be even times where I'll make mistakes and they will win. And so every win feels earned. That earned gives that earned win gives a huge dopamine kick, and every time they win and every time they learn something in order to make those wins more consistent, then I can up the skill level a little bit, make it a little bit more difficult, make it a little bit more difficult, and to the point where they're just rising up to where I'm at the point where I'm reaching my skill cap, and now I'm benefiting from the experience because now I have to figure out a way to get better in order for me to win instead of just
Yeah, like staying at your skill cap, right?
right. And this is opposed to the other person they were playing a fighting game with, where I think it was like a Naruto game where they were new to the game and the other person wasn't. The other person would just basically pick like Datara or Gara or something, some range character, and just basically just blast them against the wall over and over and over again as they just basically watch their health bar just gradually go down to zero as they have absolutely no chance of fighting back whatsoever because they don't really know how to get out of that situation. And to the other person, that was fun,
And I don't understand that because to me that's not like, is it fun to not have someone want to play with you again? Does that make sense? Like like that's why I agree with you when you say you lower your skill level to still be like a little bit better than the person you're teaching. Cuz you're right. Earning the win, feeling like you earn the win is so important.
yeah, because if you
Um
go too low, it kind of becomes obvious that, oh, you let them win and then they feel cheated. And
yeah,
it's
and
interesting
literally
because,
and
like, they won, but they're not happy about it because it wasn't earned.
exactly. Yeah, and that's like through that I've had to kind of develop my way of even coaching Pokemon, right? Like the very first game a kid has, I ended up not being able to say let's have a game. I end up doing like let's go to the first knockout. And it's not a game, it's just so you understand the game. Like that's the first tutorial I give. And sometimes it doesn't even go to the first knockout because the kid has to go because their parents want to like keep shopping around or whatever. But either way, like that gives the kid like not I won or I lost, and not oh this was hard. It's more like I now know how to play Pokemon trading card game. It's so awesome. I want to do it again and have a real game. And it's like that catalyst you said, right? Like the learning process is fun. Holy cow.
Right? I think that's
Um
a lesson a lot of teachers can learn in primary school. Is like you can make learning fun. It doesn't have to be a miserable experience for everyone. But,
and I think
part of
that
it is you have to
that's
care.
And that's part of the reason for why do people not improve is that they're not given the chance.
Right.
They're not even told what improvement even means. They just, like lots of people are just strictly a product of their environment. And I believe the current like online meta term for these people, which is so unfortunate because I hate to believe that anyone should be stuck in this situation, but I believe the term is a lifer.
A lifer.
It means like I'm gonna work at the grocery store my whole life, kind of thing, right? Isn't that a lifer?
Oh, I have no idea. I've never heard that term before.
Or like I got the term from the movie Waiting,
I
which
also
I think
haven't seen that movie.
okay, so I think the movie Waiting is a National Lampoon's movie.
Mhm.
It stars I think Ryan Reynolds. I think. But anyways, it's about serving job, and a guy has a serving job, and he kills it. He's the best server in the whole game, and it is a comedy movie, obviously, because it's a National Lampoon's.
Mhm.
But in the end, he's like, "Do I want to decide to be a lifer? Am I not wanting to improve at anything else? Am I not even wanting to take on the challenge of anything else?"
Yeah, that leads to a problem. It's kind of it's kind of like graduating from a school. Like I think this is most prominent with university more so than anything else. Because like, say if you graduate from elementary school, like you're going on to middle school, going on to high school, I mean, going on to university. It's not really. Most cases, there's not another school as university if you're not going for higher education. But one thing that's been pretty noted among people that do graduate from university is that they feel absolutely phenomenal when they graduate, and then it's gone. And then it's just, oh God, now what?
Because it's like, did I choose this line of education for a goal, or did I choose it because my parents said I should choose it?
But yeah, well, and then there's also the whole thing of like your goal wasn't so much to, yeah, in that line, your goal wasn't so much to like get a specific job that you got the university education for, but your goal was to graduate from university. And so now that you graduated from university, you're out of goals, and then it's just like, cause like now what?
Yeah.
Eh,
Is that, and if it's not, let's just go into it. But is that the definition of nihilism? And if not, what is nihilism?
Nihilism is
Is it like end of the world mentality?
no nihilism is, I guess the best way I can put it is the belief that there is no meaning to life at all.
Mm.
And so I guess one of the bad things that comes from nihilism is that if you're in the mindset that there is no meaning, no purpose to your life or anything that you do, then there's basically no consequence to what you do. That's kind of a dangerous mindset. Like imagine, you're trapped in a room with a guy that just says, "I can do whatever because whatever I do has no consequence in the grand scheme of things." You'll be absolutely terrified out of your mind to be around that person.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just that alone is a good reason not to be in a nihilistic mindset because one, like, you know, that's absolutely terrifying for everyone else, but it's also not good for you either because regardless of whether you believe there is meaning or not, there is suffering, and there's you can try to convince yourself that suffering is meaningless as much as you want, but the suffering will remind you how meaningful it is. So being in a nihilistic mindset is not a mindset you want to be in, and it's certainly not a mindset that anyone else that has to interact with you wants you to be in. So it's not good for you, and it's not good for anyone else either. So just don't do it.
Mm. Yeah, it's sounds like depression.
I mean, there's like two different forms of depression. There's the clinical depression where essentially your body is not producing enough serotonin in your body, which basically regulates you to where you are in life. And usually, people that are clinically depressed, they don't really have a reason to be sad, versus people who are depressed because some really bad thing happened to them. Like, I think, like, I remember a conversation I had with a doctor a long time ago where, they give you, like, if you go to the doctor, they give you like a questionnaire before you even meet the nurse. And on it, it's just like, oh, are you depressed? Do you have like symptoms of depression or what? And, I always check no. And then one time my doctor came in, I wasn't looking exactly ecstatic because, I had an exam coming up and I was absolutely stressed. And so they were asking just like, well, you stated no on depression, but you seem like really depressed. I was just like, well, yeah, I have an exam coming up and instead of studying for it, I'm sitting here.
Then he understood.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm not depressed. I'm just stressed out. So I look depressed. I feel depressed, but there's nothing wrong with me. This is normal. And I think with depression and anxiety and all these other mental illnesses that seem to be kind of like a fad that people want to ascribe to themselves, it's not really that they have that. It's just, the circumstance that you're in, it's just giving you that feeling. If
Hmm.
you don't have any friends and, you mostly alone and things aren't going well for you, you're not depressed, you're just in a bad situation. Like, probably if you got yourself out of that situation, you wouldn't be depressed anymore. You know, because you have fears over the future and you're worried about potential things that will happen, doesn't necessarily mean you have an anxiety disorder. Like, everyone has anxiety. Everyone's worried about the future to some extent. It's just, if it gets to the point where you literally cannot live your life, then yes, might be generalized anxiety disorder.
Something I want to point out about this question is that even though it seems like the depressing portion of this particular podcast,
Hmm.
I think it's actually the hopeful portion of the podcast in the way that we're stating these things so that you know that these things can happen, but there is a way out of them. There is a way out of it starts with acknowledging the obstacles.
Right. And you don't, especially with like mental illness, you don't want to use whatever state of mind that you're in as an excuse not to do what you're supposed to do. Or, as we mentioned earlier in this podcast, you don't want to use that as an excuse not to live up to your potential. Because, like, end all be all, some people may feel a little bit sorry for you and pat you on the head now and then, but in the grand scheme of things, no one's no one's gonna really care. Like,
Yep.
it's up to you to get yourself out of whatever situation that's causing you whatever these feelings are, so you don't have to feel like that on a regular basis.
And not just that, it comes down to, are you going to take it from those people that tell you no? Are you going to just let them say it to you? Are you going to let them just deny you externally when in reality they're not even committed to what you're committed to?
Right.
They're in reality, they're not even suffering or succeeding what you're doing. They just want something to say,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And
So that's why I say that this is not the sad part of the podcast. On the contrary, it's the realization part of the podcast.
yeah, because essentially a lot of these are just kind of obstacles that you set up for yourself based on whatever situation that you're in. But once you get to the point that you realize that, I'm saying it's not always the case because there's a chance that it could be the case that it is a mental illness, but most cases it's not. It's just you're not in a good place right now, but you can put yourself in a better place so you don't have to feel that. And honestly, like I even had this whole situation before with, I had a friend that was trying to make a friend of theirs feel better for years. They've been in this rut and not doing anything with their lives and whatnot. And eventually they had them talk to me and work through the entire situation. And then they started actually to care about life again and actually going up and going back to school and getting on, a goal and a purpose and working towards it. And the friend that was trying to help out that friend was just very confused on why they couldn't get their friend to do that. The thing I noted out was that your way of helping them through their depression was to tell them that it's okay and they're just fine the way that they are, and that's not. That's a very it's kind of like the opposite of what you said here. It sounds hopeful, but it's actually very pessimistic because like if someone's in a bad place and you tell them that it's okay, it's fine, that doesn't make it fine. And all it does is just makes it so that, that there's they're stuck in this mentality that there's no way out of that situation versus telling them that, yes, this situation is really bad, but you can get yourself out of it. There's a way out. You don't have to feel like this forever. You got to put in the work, but things will get better if you make it better.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's why I don't like. Yeah, sure, I did say hopeful, but what I mean is like it's about realization.
Hmm.
It's, yeah, okay, like anyone will agree. It feels like garbage to literally be told, "Oh, it's not that bad. You'll do better next time." Yeah, we know that sucks. I'm talking about ignoring that voice and hearing the voice that says, "This sucks. Why does it suck?
Right.
Can it be different next time?"
Right.
That's kind of what I'm saying by saying like this part of the podcast is, it's a good part. It is a harsh part, but all the best parts of life, all the best things in life come through living through the difficulty. It comes through standing up straight with your shoulders back and taking on the beating.
Yeah.
I
It's
see
this.
that you got that reference there.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to the whole hero's journey thing. Like, part of that hero's journey is the death. Death is painful, but you will come out on the other side stronger, with more knowledge, with more capability, more confidence in yourself. And every time you go through that cycle, it just gets easier and easier, just partially because you know that you can get through it and that you know that you will be better off on the other side. And this is going back to the Matthew principle. This is how you start incrementally making yourself better, and then it just gets exponentially faster as you just keep working at it and going through another transformation and another one and another one and another one as it just goes rapid faster and faster and faster. And then next thing you know, you look back at your life just like a few years prior, and the gap between who you are now and who you used to be is so staggeringly large that you'll be thinking like years ago that you're just like you would never imagine yourself at this point, but it's all a
I
matter of
don't know
just
if
getting
you read
started.
my side of the notes, but in question two on my side of the notes, I wrote chip away strategy. And
Mm,
to those of you listening that aren't familiar with video games, um, let's say let's say you're breaking down a giant ice cube and you want to turn it into an ice statue instead. You don't just simply make the ice statue. You chip away little piece at a time, and you take short breaks, and you chip away until after 24 hours, after 2 days, then you have your beautiful ice sculpture. Uh, but it doesn't happen instantly. You got to chip away at it to a grand transformation.
right. Nilo was saying people don't want to work for it, they want it to fall into place for them like it does many others. So, brought up Jordan Peterson beforehand. I think one of his chapters was it's about comparing yourself. I think it
Don't
was,
compare yourself to someone else. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
yeah, yeah. So that,
Sorry, it's fresh in my mind. Okay.
well, thank you for that. Um, yeah, that one's very, very important. A lot of people do. It's this the same going back to just like the don't meet your heroes thing. Like part of the reason why I was saying it's not exactly good is because you are comparing this mortal person, this human with human flaws and issues and whatnot, to this ideal that you set for them that they can't possibly live up to because the ideal itself is not even human. It's same thing with dating. Like a lot of issues with dating is that people they meet someone and they don't see the person as who they are, but they just set forth an idealized image of them. They get into a relationship with that image. Eventually, that image starts to fall apart, and now they're left with the actual person, and they don't like the person, but they like the idealized image that they set forth before themselves. And it's this constant comparison. When you're comparing your success to other people's successes and feeling bad about yourself, you're doing the same thing. You're putting forth this ideal of this other person, and you have no idea what they're exactly struggling with. I mean, heck, like, taking celebrities into account, there was a lot of people that would love to be in Johnny Depp's situation. They don't want to be in his situation now.
I'm not familiar with what's now versus then.
So Johnny Depp, try to make this quick because we're starting to run out of time.
Yeah,
Johnny,
we're at 5 minutes.
Johnny Depp was like a very prominent actor, made lots of money, lots of people loved him. Um, but he was in this relationship with Amber Heard, who I guess most people know as the woman in Aquaman. I think she was like the princess um, of Atlantis or the queen of Atlantis or something like that. He was in a relationship with that woman, and essentially he just was subject to domestic abuse by her. But she spun the narrative that he was doing the domestic abuse to her, despite the fact that all of his previous spouses came out and said that he has never abused them. But Amber Heard's previous spouses all stated that yes, she is a known and repeated abuser. But, you know, because she's a woman, because he's a man, generally the narrative is that like the man is always the abuser and the woman is always the victim. He got blamed for it all anyway, despite all of the evidence and despite all the testimony. And so beforehand, all these people that were saying they would like to be like Johnny Depp or in this situation, now they don't want to be. That's not just like specific to Johnny Depp. There are a lot of celebrities that are in absolutely terrible situations that people don't know about. All they can
because
see
we only
is
see
the
is the
fame and the
outside.
fortune. Yeah, they
Yeah.
see it's like I was telling like another friend about like, the Facebook pictures of like the loving couples are in embrace and stuff, and I was just like, yeah, more than likely that couple actually does not like each other. Because a lot of times like you see like couples that are really like good and well together, they don't constantly post themselves on Facebook over and over again. They're busy like actually enjoying each other. It's like a lot of the stuff you see on Facebook and Instagram and all these, it's just off. Most cases, it's just fabricated. That's not the full picture.
Yeah. So, since we have about 4 minutes left and we have a whole question to still cover, what I would like to do is actually try something that I wasn't going to anticipate that we try today. I want to give the audience, both on Twitch and when this finally ends up on YouTube, some homework. I want to turn the last question into a participation thing. And I want you guys to, in the comments or in the chat, um, give us your goal and obstacles that could happen when approaching that goal. And I want you, James, to take it away by describing what you have written there on your side of the question.
So this is. So what I have written here, I guess this is kind of like a summary that we kind of cover like everything in this list over this episode so far in the places, but I guess just to give it as a summary. So this is how to overcome obstacles. First thing we talked about was establishing a desirable outcome. You want a goal that you can reasonably attain, that you will actually work towards. And that gives you something to do. That gives you something to work towards. That gives you a reason to improve. It gives you multiple skill sets, maybe one skill set, but maybe multiple skill sets that you could possibly use in other facets of your life. And it, most importantly, it gives you a sense of meaning because you're actually doing something that you specifically find worthwhile, and maybe even other people find worthwhile, and then they want to be around you because of that. Secondly is, you should define a situation that you don't want to be in, that you will get into if you don't establish a goal worth striving towards. You do want to take note of your physical health. Take care of your body, have good nutrition, do some exercise. You don't have to go to the gym and, get absolutely jacked, but you should, take care of your body because you will regret it later in life when you get old and things start falling apart if you don't take care of it now. Taking care of your mental health. Mental health and physical health are definitely important together. A lot of cases you can take care of your mental health by taking care of your physical health, but another way is just establishing positive relationships with other people, not even just necessarily romantic, but you know maybe you don't get along well with your parents, but maybe you have good relationship with your brother or sister, or maybe a cousin or aunt or uncle, or just anyone in your family that you can establish a good quality relationship with. Like, it doesn't just have to be within your nuclear family.
I wanna real quickly interject, just because I thought again. I know this keeps happening. I thought again of Jordan Peterson. Not a particular chapter, and I don't know where in his book 12 Rules for Life this is, but he says something like the best start to a good mental health is by having the habit of a high protein breakfast, which is taking care of your physical health. Anyways, go on.
Um, yeah, so you do want to establish a strong social network, find a family member that you get along well with, and really nurture that relationship. Find some friends that that you can care about and they can care about you and can build each other up to becoming better than what you are now. Like, that's one of the greatest things you can do in your life, and that gives you like a sense of meaning right there. And do understand that you do want to prioritize a quality relationship versus a quantity. Like, it's better to have a few close best friends than a whole bunch of acquaintances. It's a
Mhm.
huge difference between the two. Like, you can feel lonely in a crowd. And then, you also want to consider that your own personal improvement and the success that you gain in your life isn't just for you, but it impacts everyone that you're affiliated with. So you're not just doing this for yourself, but you're doing this for everyone that cares about you, everyone that you will meet in the future. Like, one day you're probably going to become a mentor or a teacher, and all of the things that you learned in your struggles to become what you are at that point can be passed down to them so they can do it easier than what you have to. They don't have to make the same exact failures that you made because they can hear it coming from you. Then you can make the world a better place in that way by just, motivating other people to aspiring to great things like you were. So there's multiple reasons why to improve. It's just a matter of deciding to do it.
Yeah. Um, that about sums it up. So I want to see some comments in the YouTube post. Thank you everyone who showed up and was chatting, and I want to thank you as well, James, for continuing this with me. It's been an awesome project. I honestly, it's filling my mind with thoughts throughout the month leading up to the episode that we're on, and I keep thinking about it, and honestly, like I feel like this episode was not just about like a personal improvement, but I also feel it about this podcast. Like, how can we improve the podcast? I know that I had to try doing it out and about today. I would like to try this again. I would like to make sure uh, my systems function better. But I think it went great. I do wanna say that I'm greatly looking forward to the next episode. And to everyone out there watching, we do have a website. It's at the top of the screen there. Make sure you guys check it out. And if you ever want to catch us live, you can do so from the website. And that way you see both our perspectives at the same time. And you can literally point at me and be like, ah, Joe's not paying attention to James, or vice versa. Um, Waving at people as they walk by, I guess. So that that has been an episode 2 of the monthly meta. And I want to give James a chance to close out the episode as well. So go ahead, James.
I think this is fun. Honestly, it may be apparent in my posture or body language or whatnot that this is it's a little bit nerve-wracking for me. I haven't done public speaking, but I've never done public speaking in a format like this before, so it is a little bit new to me. But I think in regards to the whole idea of self-improvement, I think this is just another way for me to improve myself. So yeah, I'm excited for it, and we'll see how this goes in the future. So thanks for watching and sticking around with us, and let's see how this goes.